Ecuador, being one of the Latin American countries, has been colonized by the Spaniards, has been a victim to US imperialism during the 60s, 70s, and 80s, especially because it's a country that's very wealthy in natural resources, one of the original quote-unquote banana republics, along with the countries that me and Camarada Cero are from, Colombia and Honduras. And it's just another example of a nation under the boot of US imperialism that has been dominated by Wall Street and London and the stock exchange of the imperialist countries. So starting off in the 90s, right, we have the era of neoliberalism dominating the world, the collapse of the Soviet Union. We have this mentality that the private sector, the market, the banks, they should run everything. And Ecuador was no exception. In the 90s, you had this class of people who Rafael Correa, the former president, would call pelucones, which I love that term. It's a funny term because it comes from the wealthy people who used to wear these wigs, the elite, and these wigs were kind of like the wealthy settlers who were on the coast and Guayaquil and other parts. And so this class of pelucones or bankers or whatever you want to call them, they oversaw a huge economic crisis in the late 90s, in 1998 and 1999, called the Feriado Bancario, the banker's holiday, in which Ecuador's economy was entirely tanked by these bankers. There was, in the private financial sector, the banks had distributed really risky loans and failed to maintain liquidity. It was a huge scam. They were giving out all these loans, promising this, promising that. And then one day to the next, they just dipped. They all went to Miami. They all went to Europe. They left the country. They totally fucked up the economy. And people like the Isais brothers, Roberto, William, and Estefano Isais, these three banker brothers, they stole millions of dollars from the Ecuadorian people. They left to Miami. Eventually, they were prosecuted under Correa's government. But so many people like this who left the country, who made money from scamming people through these banking schemes. Eventually, under the government of Jamil Mawad, there was severe inflation and devaluation of the Ecuadorian sucre, which was the currency of Ecuador at the time prior to the dollar. Sucre, named after one of the independence heroes of Ecuador and at the time of La Gran Colombia. And eventually, Ecuador was forced to adopt the US dollar as a national currency. Obviously, this is very devastating for the people of Ecuador to not even be able to use their own currency. Now their commodities and labor competes with the dollar in the market of Ecuador. So it's a very bad end of the deal for the working class in Ecuador. So there's huge anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist passion in Ecuador. The people have been pummeled, destroyed by neoliberalism, by capitalism, by these banking elites, these pelucones from Guayaquil, from Wall Street, from Miami. And between 2000 and 2006, we had a continuation of some of these policies of neoliberalism. You had the rise of the leftist movement in Ecuador, the indigenous movement, and you had a very powerful figure by the name of Rafael Correa, who's the president of Ecuador, who came into power in 2007. He was elected in January 2007 with the Alianza País party. And it's a very progressive party, social democratic. We have, as revolutionary socialists, we have some critiques of it, but nonetheless, a good step forward for this Latin American country. And with the Citizens' Revolution, Correa was able to usher in progressive reforms in terms of healthcare, education, housing, indigenous rights, protecting the environment in the Constitution, protecting indigenous rights in the Constitution. As I mentioned earlier, I lived in Ecuador in 2017 at the end of Correa's presidency last year. And it was a very beautiful experience to see the progress, the peace, the stability of Ecuador under Correa. Granted, there was contradictions, there was problems, it wasn't perfect. But I personally spoke to a lot of people, especially on the coast, who loved Correa, who were proud of the work that the Citizens' Revolution did. Eventually, in 2017, there was Lenin Moreno, who succeeded Rafael Correa after the election against Lasso as well, who won the recent election. Lenin Moreno also came from Alianza País. However, Lenin Moreno, as many call him, the traitor, the traidor of Latin America, because he was somebody who rolled back a lot of those gains. He privatized a lot of key social programs, public programs. He initiated paquetazos, these IMF reforms, these neoliberal packages that devastated the working class. And he went and backstabbed Correa. He backstabbed the Ecuadorian people. Eventually, in 2019, there was some huge protests against Moreno and neoliberalism. The whole country was on lockdown. People were rising up, as was the rest of Latin America and the Caribbean. 2020, COVID hit Ecuador particularly bad. I'm sure we all saw some of those images of bodies of people in Guayaquil, especially, where the public services that were once funded by the government, once had support by the Citizens Revolution, were privatized. And now a lot of these medical industries failed to provide services for the people. A lot of people died, which was very unfortunate in Ecuador. And it just shows how much of a failure capitalism and neoliberalism are in handling pandemics like COVID-19.